One thing that's been crucial for me as a full-time nomad is knowing that I have places to stop on the road, including rest areas, scenic overlooks, trailheads, and turnouts. Now, rules vary, but today I'm going to tell you everything I know and the tips and tricks to finding safe, reliable spots that you can use on the road too. Hey everybody, it's Robin with Creativity RV, and thank you for coming to episode 7, I think, of Be a Nomad, Change Your Life. As I told you guys in the past, my goal in this series is to give you every tool that you need to be a full-time nomad in one playlist, including an arsenal of free and cheap places that you can stay overnight or camp. So I mentioned that I was going to take you guys with me as I went along on some of my journeys, and that includes today because I am taping this right now at a rest area in Vail, Colorado. So the first place that I stopped at this morning was a scenic overlook just near Frisco, Colorado, and I mean, it was gorgeous. There's a lake on one side and snow-capped mountains on the other, and a trailhead where a lot of people were coming to park. So I personally, last night, did not stay at this scenic overlook, but I definitely will in the future, because this morning I went and checked it out. I pulled in, I checked the signs. There were no signs that said no parking, and I interviewed 2 people that had stayed there overnight. One was a truck driver, and he said on I-70 there's not a lot of places for them to pull off as they are required to do. And he was actually really excited because he got there at 2:30 in the morning, he said, and he had no idea how beautiful it was until he woke up. I actually caught him taking a bunch of photos, and we chatted for a while. And it is common for truckers to pull over at scenic overlooks, especially if there's no overnight parking or camping signs, because the rest areas have limited parking in that area and the towns are so tight they have nowhere else to go. And there were a lot of other trucks and a lot of cars when I got there early this morning, probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, including a lady that clearly had been in her car that night. And so you guys know me, I'm out to get the information for you. So I went up and waved at her. I didn't want to scare her from a ways away. And of course she rolled down her window like, what the hell do you want? And I said, hey, look, that's my RV over there, and I'm a travel blogger, and I just wanted to ask you if you stayed here last night and what it was like. And she said, oh yeah, this is a normal route for me. This is a commute that I make all the time up and down I-70, and this is my spot. I stay here all the time. I've never had any problem. Now let me say again here, rules vary. And a lot of the time when you go to search online, you're not going to find a whole lot of information online. Cities and governments and municipalities just don't have the budget to be monitoring these places and also adding the information to their website. So for these types of areas, you really need to follow, I think, a few basic tips to find out if it's going to be a good spot for you. The first tip is read the signs. If you see a sign that says no overnight parking, no overnight camping, usually these signs are there because it's either monitored or really busy, or there have been safety issues there. So if that's the case, move on. If you're just going down the road and you just want to pull in and look at the signs, that's great. But you might be wondering, what do I do if I'm planning ahead on a trip and I'm looking for some options to stay overnight? How do I find out? So I like to do some research before I go down a road that I don't know. And one of the ways that I do that is to Google scenic overlooks or trailheads on the highway that I'm going to be traveling down. So for example, I Googled the one that I was at this morning and searched for reviews. So I went into reviews of the trailhead, and I also went into the trailhead information that was managed by the government. In this case, that trailhead was managed by the U.S. Forest Service. They had a website, they had a phone number you could call. They had no information on that site about overnight parking. If I just have the time and I want to be sure, I call and I ask. And usually they say, yeah, it's don't stay too long, don't put out your slide, don't put up a tent, but yeah, there's no restriction against it, is usually what I get. Another thing to do is look at the reviews. If you go into a trailhead and just put it in Google and say reviews, Yelp will give you reviews, so will Google, so will freecampsites.net, but that's the way to get the broadest amount of information. People will tell you if they had any problems there, like a knock on the door telling them to get out, if they got a ticket, or if they had some safety issue in one of those spots. Or the vast majority of time, I see reviews from people where they say, stayed there a bunch of times, had no problem at all. Scenic Overlooks and Trailheads, I find a lot of times start at the same place. Sometimes they're separate, but trailhead parking kind of follows the same rules as the scenic overlook parking. Look for the signs, do some reviews. And another thing is, if you know the name of the trailhead, which you can search trailheads near me or trailheads on I-70, for example, you can actually then take the name of that trailhead or that scenic overlook and you go into Google Earth. In Google Earth, put that in, and then I always say scoop down to look at it, and someone said you should say zoom. Okay, so you zoom down and you look at it, and in Google Earth, you can do a 360-degree view of that parking lot for the trailhead or for the scenic overlook, and you can look for the signs in advance to see if there's any signs there that say you shouldn't be there. You can also see how many people are parking there, at least when they took the Google Earth photos. So if you pull up and there's no camping or no overnight parking signs, you see other people have been there overnight, Google Earth shows that it's pretty good, or the reviews look pretty good, you're probably good to go, but it's always a good thing to have a backup. The good thing about places like this is there's a ton of them, so if the first one doesn't work, you probably have some more down the road you can check out. I'm going to throw a little history at you guys. The original rest areas were called interstate safety areas, and they were started in 1956. Now, these were the ones that had like a really dim light that swung overhead and 2 dirty bathrooms and inspired like 20 years of slasher films. That was true for a while, and I remember when I first started RVing, a lot of people said I would never stay at a rest stop, they're totally unsafe. Well, these rest areas went into disrepair because of budget cuts, and also because motels started popping up and truck stops along the way, and they just weren't managed. But then they started to link highway fatalities to a lack of rest areas. And about 15 years ago, there was a big push to make new rest areas. And that's why you see these really glossy, high-end rest area, travel center, visitor centers pop up. Now, these places are great because some of them have dump stations and Wi-Fi and bathrooms, and some of them even have water. They're well lit. A lot of times there is video surveillance, and they're a lot different than they used to be. But if they're really busy, some of them do have rules against staying for an extended period of time. The second of the 3 places that I'm going to show you is a rest area just up I-70 before you get to Vail, Colorado. Now, I'm just using these as examples. A lot of these rules can be true in a variety of states, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But I knew this rest area because I had come here before. Now, watch when I pull in. This is an extremely busy rest area, and when you pull in, it's going to say there's an hour parking limit max. And so you don't want to stay overnight in this rest area because look at all the bicyclists and people that are here for recreation. Definitely this one is monitored. It's great. There's bathrooms and picnic tables and, trash cans if you need them. Pull in for an hour. It's great. But one thing that you find when you're going down the road is that for a lot of these busy rest areas right nearby, there's going to be an overnight parking spot. When I first pulled in, you might see here that there was a sign that said rest area to the left, and then before you turn into the rest area, there's a sign that says overnight parking to the right. Now, there were a lot of trucks there. There were a lot of people that were here for recreation, maybe stayed overnight to go on an early morning hike, but I actually did stay overnight at this very spot, I think last year, and I had no problem at all, and you wake up to these amazing views. So again, rules vary by rest area. Look at the signs and you'll be fine. Before I get to the next area, I'm going to address some questions you probably have about staying in rest areas. A lot of them have signs that say no overnight parking or no camping, and you're probably thinking, what's the difference? What are the definitions? Well, the definitions vary by state. And if you call different agencies in each of these states, which I have, they are reticent to answer the question. There's not real definitions. It can be a little bit murky, but in my experience, and please people, put in the comments below if you disagree or if you've had another experience. In my experience, no camping means don't put out a tent, don't put out a slide, don't look like you're living there, don't put out a barbecue grill. If you are respectful and pull in and just rest, which is what the rest areas are for, and you don't abuse it, you should really have no problem. As a general rule for me, if there are signs like overnight parking strictly enforced, or especially if there's a time limit, like 1 hour or 3 hours, I definitely leave. And if I feel like it's a little bit shady, maybe it's not kept up very well, or there's some shady activity going on, I leave. There are lots of places to stay. When I started my blog last year, I actually did a blog post on staying in rest areas. And in that original blog post, like a lot of other people online, I listed the 9 states where overnight parking is allowed in rest areas. But I redid that blog post for you guys, and I'm putting the link below because as I drilled down into each of these states, I found out that that information was wrong. A lot of these states, their rules have changed because budgets are changing, or there are states that allow it that aren't on this list. So here's what I've done for you guys. If you go to the link for my blog below and you look at the blog post that came out also today on Sunday for how to stay overnight in rest areas, I have put links to every single state's Department of Transportation that I could find for you. So you could go into the state that you're going to visit and drill down to see what their rules are. Now, a lot of them have no rules on their websites at all. So sometimes you just do need to follow the same things that you would in the Scenic Overlook. Go to the rest area on Google Maps, look at the reviews, do a 360-degree view to see if you can see the signs, and that should work. There are some states, however, that have some rules that are pretty consistent. Like California, for example, allows you to stay for 8 hours and 24 hours. And I've never seen them on one of the lists of states that allow overnight parking, but they do. And this is how I stayed in San Francisco and saw the whole city in the video that I did about RV San Francisco for free. We stayed 20 minutes outside of the city on one side for 2 nights, and then we actually stayed at a scenic overlook. It's called a scenic overlook, but it was also a rest area right on the Golden Gate Bridge. Had no problems at all, and we were not the only ones. There were lots of people there. So that's the kind of thing you want to look for. Lots of people there, and if they post the rules, great. Otherwise, if they say you can't do it, don't do it. One time I was in Wyoming, and I had been told that they did not allow overnight parking or camping in the rest areas, even though sometimes they're listed on those lists of states that do. Well, I went into the Wyoming Territorial Prison to do a blog post story on that visit, and while I was there were a bunch of brochures on the wall, and I saw a brochure for the rest areas in Wyoming. And ever since then, I have searched on Google for rest area brochure for the state I'm going to, and most of the time, I find something that looks just like this. I'm going to put this in my blog for you guys so you can actually see this verbiage, but this is common state verbiage that I have found in about 3 states. Even if they don't say it on their website, in the PDF of the brochure, it says something like this. Sleeping at rest areas. Camping is prohibited at rest areas, but drivers who need rest to safely continue their travels can sleep in their vehicles in the parking lots. The National Sleep Foundation recommends a nap of 15 to 20 minutes to improve alertness and driving skills. If you need more than a nap, you can sleep in your vehicle for a longer period, but don't pitch a tent, extend your RV slide outs, or otherwise set up for an extended stay. So here's the bottom line. The rest areas are available for us to keep the highways safe. That means don't abuse it. Look at the signs. Don't stay if there's a maximum time limit. Don't stay if it seems shady or there are bad reviews. If you can research in advance, do it on Google Earth where you can get a 360-degree view and look at all the parking signs. And I'll say this, if you're in a busy area, get there mid-afternoon because if there's only a few spots, they fill it very quickly. I'll also say some of those spots are meant for truckers, and I know I'm going to get some pushback on this in the comments that it's meant for everybody. I've heard this for truck stops also. But just remember that the truckers by law are required to stop for a certain amount of time and sleep. And if you pull into a rest area and take the last spot for a trucker, you could really be hurting somebody when you could be going down the road a little bit and getting another spot. And finally, you guys, I'm going to take you to my all-time favorite rest area that I've ever stayed at. This is up past Vail. It's called the No Name Rest Area in No Name, Colorado. It's part of Glenwood Canyon, and it's right on the Colorado River, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, when I pulled in there the first time that I stayed there, it's a small lot. The one thing that told me that it was okay to stay overnight is that they have spaces specifically for truck drivers. Look, the rest areas are there for us. I've been doing this for over a year. I think I've stayed in at least 50 rest areas or scenic overlooks or trailheads, and I've never had a problem. Follow these tips, and I hope that you don't have a problem either. If you have anything to add to the conversation, please do put it in the comments below. Like and share this with your friends, and come back next Sunday for episode 8 of Be a Nomad, Change Your Life. Everybody be safe out there and be free.